From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief.
This is Shannon Fleck, and this is my friend,
Reverend Raushenbush.
Yes, and we are here in Washington, D.C., right in front of the Supreme Court to speak out against St. Isidore Charter School, which is coming from Oklahoma.
This is dangerous for public schools. It's dangerous for kids who want to actually be themselves in public schools and not bring religion into public schools or have to divert money away from public schools, which is what this really does.
And then it's fully the government establishing a religious preference by funneling public dollars into a specific religious entity. That is a door we don't want to open because it's going to snowball and hit us all.
We're very worried about it, but we know that actually history is on our side. Non-establishment of religion, it's so important. And it's so important that actually is what allows free exercise of religion. Those two things go together.
If one is preferred over the other, we're all done.
And so once you have state-sponsored, religious public schools, who's to say they can't dictate to a religion? Also, if you're a kid going to a religious school, they get a choice of whether to accept you or not, whether to kick you out or not, whether you're the right kind of person for their religious school. And here's the thing, in a public school, they have to accept everyone. That's the idea of public school, that we come together, we learn from one another, and everyone has a right to education. This goes against that. So we encourage everyone to really stay tuned and focus in on this because it's going to matter for you and your community.
That's right. You all stay in touch with us as we follow this one, okay?
This last Tuesday, I was at the Supreme Court with many allies, including this week's guest on The State of Belief, Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, Executive Director of Faithful America. The justices were hearing arguments in a crucial case about religion and public education, and we were there to bear witness and deliver a warning about religious charter schools that could be soon receiving public funds. You'll hear a lot more about that case later in the show. Just keep in mind this interview was recorded earlier in the month. But Shannon has deep insights into the origins and potential harm of this lawsuit. She's actually from Oklahoma. We'll get into all of that in this week's The State of Belief.
Lots of people are asking what they can do about the erosion of American democracy and values. Faithful America is one organization that provides answers. They regularly send out action alerts to get Christians involved in social justice and to push back against extremist views, especially Christian nationalism. They use online petitions, grassroots campaigns to work on issues like LGBTQ rights, racial justice, and climate change. And they just got a new leader. Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck is their new executive director, and she's my guest on The State of Belief this week. We need to hear voices like Shannon now more than ever. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Our library of past conversations include well over 100 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Rabbi Sharon Brous, Dr. Anathea Butler, Bishop William Barber, Rob Reiner, and many others. You can help grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck is an Oklahoma native and ordained minister with a passion for social justice and interfaith relations. She recently took the role of executive director at Faithful America, the largest online community of Christians advocating for social justice. With a doctorate of ministry degree from Candler School of Theology at Emory University and a Master of Divinity degree from Phillips Theological Seminary, Shannon was a longtime leader of the Oklahoma Faith Network, where she was instrumental in initiatives like No Hate in the Heartland and promoting inclusion and combating Christian nationalism in Oklahoma. And now she's here on The State of Belief. Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We are so glad to have you, and congratulations on your new position. This is really, really exciting. I'm asking guests the honest question of how you doing, because we can't just barrel ahead thinking everybody's hunky-dory in this time. So how are you doing?
Right after the election, I went into a period of despondency, and it was rough for about a month. And I came out of that with a sense of drive. And I can't describe where it came from except from my reference, which is God and my point of view. But I just knew, okay, here we go. Like, the staying silent is not going to be an option. Moving forward is the only way to do this. You've been doing this for so long. Keep going.
Yeah. I
And
love that. I love that
yeah,
because I feel like a lot of us went through that journey. And some of us are still in various points of that journey, and no shame at all. It's been, for me, like just coming alive to this moment and recognizing what's at stake, but also recognizing I was made for this moment. And if I don't respond to it, then shame on me. And so I think it's great that you feel that you were made for this moment. And I'm getting that vibe from you. Maybe you can
yeah.
take us back. You're from Oklahoma. Now that is an amazing state that has all kinds of stuff going on at the same time. Tell us about your background. Like, how did you grow up? What role did faith play in your own background?
I was raised in a small town in Oklahoma, about 30 miles north of Oklahoma City, raised by a single mom who is a public educator. And so that's, instilled in my heart and soul and spirit. I would run around as a little girl, her school, after school, and just play in all the classrooms, and, you know, had a wonderful childhood, very just protected, safe, small town. And
Mm.
I went to undergrad 15 minutes away, so I did not go far for undergrad. But when I came back from getting my bachelor's degree, my very first job out of undergrad was doing juvenile probation work for the state of Oklahoma. Now, what was wild about that is that I was 22 years old. I had lived in this small town bubble. I had never seen abuse or pain or addiction or any of the things that I was about to see in and out every single day. And that job changed everything about how I approached life, because I knew I wanted to serve and I loved people, but I never knew what that would look like. And that job honed me in on, okay, there is radical pain in this world and I need to spend my life doing something to
Mm.
address it.
Were you already raised in the church and
Mm.
feeling some sort of call in that direction, even as you were doing that first job?
You know, It's only in reflecting back, but yes, I was raised in my home congregation. It's a Disciples of Christ congregation. My mom took us every Sunday, and I look back and remember a youth group mission trip to St. Louis, Missouri. I remember laying in the grass outside after a worship service we did on our mission trip as a group and feeling a call to ministry.
Mm.
But I was like 13 years old and I had never seen a female in that role. And I didn't know what in the world that was about. So
Okay.
I dismissed it and only found it again later when I was in seminary, really dissecting my history. So
Uh-huh.
it was there. I didn't want to, I don't know, accept it because I didn't know how to implement such a thing when you've never
Right.
seen it in front of you.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. What I'm connecting is this kind of sense of ministry, sense of calling, and then encountering pain.
Yeah.
And seeing like, oh, okay, there is deep pain in the world that no one's doing this to themselves. This is being done to them, and they're trapped in some kind of system that is creating a pain and suffering and oppression. And so I do think that there's an interesting through line for many people who've gone and felt a call to ministry and then encountered really radical oppression and said, oh, I have to like process this into what I think is ministry and what I think is actually the Christian call. And I'm kind of channeling what happened to Walter Raushenbush when he went to Hell's Kitchen to kind of save souls, and then all of a sudden saw these people, attacked by a system that was creating poverty and like the death of babies because they were poor. And he had to rethink everything. And then he went back to the gospel. He was like, oh, wow, it's everywhere. And I didn't see it because I didn't have those eyes yet. And so I can imagine that, all of this is coming together. And so after that job, and you went to seminary and you were still discerning, like, what do I really want to do? And what do I really feel called to do? And is it me? And I think as a woman, for you, and as a gay man, for me, it all felt like very like a crazy idea, but I'm still taking the next step. Tell us a little bit about how you went to seminary and then, the continued growth.
While I was still doing juvenile probation, I was also filling in as a youth minister at that same home church. Wow. And so they had lost their youth pastor. I was young and around. And they were like, hey.
Which is, with many of those churches, it's like, that's all they're looking for. Right, young and around. You're hired. You're hired.
Yeah. Except I was never hired. I did it for free.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is totally because, and here's why. It was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be like a stopgap while they found the new person. And 2 years later, I was still doing it and still doing it for free. However, what I will say is that while I was doing that, my home congregation hired a female minister to be the associate.
I love that. Yeah.
And the woof that happened that I didn't even recognize until she pulled me aside one day and said, hey, have you ever considered seminary?
I love that. I love that. That's what's so great is like, and even just asking that question to anyone is so powerful. I tell the story, like the church I grew up in the 70s, I'm older than you, had a female associate pastor, and I just thought every church had women pastors, but I didn't realize until later the 70s was really early. That, one of the first churches, but for me, that was just like, that was my tradition from then on. And that's how radical it is to have women, the widening of the inclusion of in the pulpit is that it becomes the tradition rather than the exception or something weird. It's just what you grow up with and what you know and what you expect almost. And so that's great. And I love that she asked you the question. When I was at Princeton, I would ask I would just go up to people who were like economics majors or whatever. And have you ever considered seminary? Just because no one else at the university was going to be asking that question. And so I would just ask it to everyone. And the amazing thing is a lot of them would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're asking me that question. Because it's been in my mind and it's just, I had nowhere to process this. And so you must have been like, wow, okay. I wasn't until now. And now I'm like maybe thinking about seminary.
Well, I mean, I laughed at her in her face. I have since apologized for that because I was like, you're not serious. This is no. And so she had already done the pre-work of gotten me a whole packet too. So she had a packet for me when she posed the question. And
that's pastoral work. I'm not only going to ask the question, I'm going to keep pushing you a little bit. Here's the next step. Here's the next step. That's great.
And I still consider her a friend and mentor today.
Yeah.
Where we still have that relationship. But she planted a seed within me that I think hit something that was already inside of me. And it blossomed. And then I started seminary. And even while I was in seminary, I didn't necessarily see myself in parish ministry. But I mean, I continued on because what I was learning was just incredible. I was soaking up seminary like a sponge. There was so much information. And I often say I deconstructed with Bible scholars because I feel like that's the experience of seminary.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so exciting. I mean, I say the 3 years of seminary were the most important in my life. I mean, now I have kids now, so like I don't compare it to that, but like it is like it totally changed the way I view the world and how I understood myself in the world. And it's not only the Bible, but it's the people around you who are forced me to deconstruct myself and say, what do I really believe in? And how have I been operating the world? And, being at Union with James Cone and Raphael Warnock was there when I was there. And, so you're getting all of these amazing kind of testimonies, and then you're offering yours, which is actually like, so it's all things going all the way. So you eventually, you got your degree. When did you get ordained? And then you didn't do the thing that I think is tempting to do and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to a really like kind of hip church in New York, and I'm going to, or wherever, or Atlanta or whatever. You were in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You did your ministry in Oklahoma, which I think is amazing.
Yes. I graduated in 2011. Wow. Yeah. 2011. And was ordained literally the day after graduation because I had family from all over the country that was in town. So we were just doing it.
Yeah.
And no, I didn't pursue anything trendy or hip. I actually got married 2 months after that to a man that's active duty Air Force.
Wow.
And so I spent a few years with him in Texas where I did adult mental health work.
Amazing.
I spent about 2 years in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I actually worked for the chapel on the Air Force Base there as a contractor. So I didn't really get to do anything ministerial. It was very administrative, but it was a job in a church, right?
Yeah,
like I was finally using my education. And then we came back to Oklahoma after the birth of our daughter because my family was here.
Yeah.
And I got a job at a church in Enid, Oklahoma, where we were living, and did that for 2 years and confirmed, I think, that probably was not the route for me. And at the conclusion of my marriage, the job was kind of winding down into a place where I was discerning, oh, this is not. And then this job down in the big city of Oklahoma City was hiring a director of programs, and that was called the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. And so I jumped in on a new type of ministry.
Isn't that amazing? And again, this is so important. These organizations that people think, oh, like that's not. They can make a huge difference in a community. They can help people show up. They can help people get organized. They mobilize people. They have a moral power, to speak out. And so this all is such like important, stepping stones on all the stuff that's leading you up to Faithful America. So we can fast forward. You eventually became kind of a statewide leader in Oklahoma, talking about religion and public life.
Woo, man, what a journey. So what an absolute journey. The organization I inherited was very much based on the National Council of Churches model, very membership, denominational, ecumenical based. And it was struggling. It was struggling to maintain that model, just as we all know, the churches are struggling, and it's that state level where they really feel that pinch the most. And so we had to figure out something different. And so I started on a journey of just leaning into the things that a lot of people were not saying. And that became popular and unpopular at the same time.
I'm sure. What were some of those things? Why don't you just like let's name them? Because that's worth naming. Because those are often the issues that, like traditional ecumenical groups, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to talk about this. We're not going to talk about this because those things will drive us apart. And but then you end up being completely hamstringed about what you do talk about. So what were the things that you wanted to talk about in Oklahoma? And what year was this? This would have been, that's pretty recent, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was named executive director in 2018. And within months, of me being named the executive director, an entire denomination left our organization. They left it very publicly and out loud, put it on the front page. And it was a very bold statement against hiring me because I was seen as someone who was too political. This same denomination would go on to push St. Isidore. Same denomination. And then and that was crushing as a brand new executive director. I was super young, and that was hard. And the next time I caused a kerfluffle was our state House of Representatives was not letting our local imam offer the prayer on the House floor. He had been nominated to do so through all the correct processes, and they refused to let him do that. And one of the first acts I did as executive director was organize a response around the chaplaincy program at our house and how discriminatory it is, how they were continuing to make new rules about praying and who can pray and who cannot.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So that was the first, and that was 2018. That was like right out of the gate. Probably how I got the reputation of being political. I don't know. And so then in 2020, I launched a campaign called No Hate in the Heartland. I shouldn't say we did. The board was on board with it, the staff, and it was beautiful. We launched a theological statement about anti-racism and anti-discrimination, and put out an anti-discrimination policy, which was a first for a religious organization in the state of Oklahoma. That act cost me more members to walk away because if we were going to do an anti-discrimination statement, I wasn't going to leave anybody out.
Right.
That wasn't going to happen. We were going to name every member of society that is discriminated against and cast aside, especially in the name of faith. Because what I was seeing happening was all of this religious discrimination, but I didn't have a name for it. I didn't have a term for what was going on. I just knew it was amplifying and getting worse, and we needed to meet that moment. It wasn't until January 6th that I had that moment of, okay, this is a lot scarier and bigger.
Up next, much more with Shannon Fleck. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe at stateofbelief.com/subscribe. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush. My guest is Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, who has just accepted the position of Executive Director at Faithful America. So let's talk about Oklahoma, because I feel like, I used to say Texas and Florida were really vying for the title of like most Christian nationalists or white Christian nationalists of them all, but I think Oklahoma is like kind of coming up from behind and really passing. And so let's talk about Ryan Walters and the wonderful the grift of the Trump Bible, among so many other things. But I think the reason it's so important to talk about this is a lot of things that are going to impact the national conversation are happening in Oklahoma. So talk to me a little bit about like the lay of the land, including the lawsuit, which is very, very dangerous. And we have an amicus brief on that, and I want to talk more about it. But talk to me about what's going on in Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh, Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. I love the people here. There's a reason I'm here. But my God, We have experienced a takeover in a way that you can look back and see very plainly that is in alignment with everything that's happening now on the national stage. We used to have Democratic governors. We used to have Democratic reps and senators. It was a pretty, bipartisan legislature that got things done. And when our last Democratic governor, Brad Henry, left office in 2011, we were 17th in public ed rankings in the country. And that was a push up. We went up to 17 from like 23 or 32 within his time as governor. So here we are in 2025 and we're 49th. Shocked if we aren't going to hit 50th. And that's a quick drop. And that happened because the House races, the Senate races were so gerrymandered and changed. Election laws were changed to make it harder to vote. We see this SAVE Act going through Congress right now. We need to be paying very close attention to that. That is not safe. That is fully sinister and something to watch. Things like that have been happening in Oklahoma that has now created this massive Republican supermajority that is so scared of voting against this agenda that they will not act. There are plenty of Republicans in Oklahoma that I visit with, that I have talked to, who say, I cannot impeach Ryan Walters because I will not get reelected. And that's the state of things. The Christian nationalists from all over are funding elections here. Yeah. Wisconsin, Supreme Court, we just saw that.
For sure.
Oklahoma had a same Supreme Court race in our elections last year that they were interfering in and changing because our Supreme Court said no to St. Isidore. So that made them quite upset.
Uh-huh.
But Mr. Ryan Walters comes onto the scene overseeing a nonprofit called ECHO. Every Kid Counts in Oklahoma is the name of this nonprofit. And his job is to oversee gear funds from the epidemic, or the pandemic, rather, and ends up spending, misappropriating millions. Millions of dollars are misappropriated during his time there. So it makes sense then that our governor, Governor Stitt, would elevate him to Secretary of Education in 2022.
It's so shocking. Shocking. I mean, yes. And, and of course, because of the ranking, the incredibly low ranking of Oklahoma schools, he's immediately going to get to work on
putting Bibles everywhere he possibly can.
The Trump Bible, no less. I mean, that was at least, I don't know if that's gone through, but, that was the big grift, and yeah, Bibles, not only Bibles, but there was, a certain, what was it, prayer, or was it a certain kind of curriculum that was being put into the schools that, again, what's really important is, both you and I are ministers. We're not anti-religion, and we're not anti-religion in school. People can pray in school. That's totally their business. And you can learn about religion in school. That is everybody's they took religion out of school. They took God out of. That's not what we're talking. We're talking about coercion.
Yep.
Coercion of students to believe something particular, which is the most anti-American thing I can think of. So anyway, sorry, a little rant there, but so what, this is what, talk about priorities.
I know. Well, and right now, the curriculum that you're speaking of is in our legislature. Right. So we had people from Heritage Foundation, Dennis Prager. We had all kinds of people come together to write our social studies curriculum standards. This happened in the summer last year that I got wind of this. How that normally is supposed to go is educators come together to write the curriculum and make recommendations. Educators. Ryan Walters himself was on this very committee in 2019. He knows how this goes. Yet he brought this cabal of folks together and wrote standards that are atrocious.
Mm.
Reading them is sickening at the
Wow.
level of Christian indoctrination and, quite frankly, theological lies. It
I
was
mean,
clearly not written by anyone that has theological awareness. It's it's atrocious. So
yeah,
right
yeah.
now, there's a lot of movement trying to get our Oklahoma legislature to vote on it because last year they didn't vote on anything related to Ryan Walters and it just flew through. So
Mm.
we're trying to demand vote on it and
Yeah,
vote no,
yeah,
like
for
do
sure.
both of those things.
Yeah, yeah, you can do that. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I have a real, you mentioned earlier that you have a lot of friends or like, acquaintances who are Republicans who say, I can't do that because I'll lose my office. Lose your office. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not like, I just am not in the business of caring if you're not able to stand up for your values. What are you doing as a public servant? Like, what are you
Right.
doing and we hear this about in the House on the Hill in DC. Oh, I can't because I'll lose my job. It's like, then lose it. What,
Yeah.
all you have to lose is your integrity.
That's right.
you know?
That to me is the big cost. Like, that's not worth it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You sell your soul for another 2 years of, kind of a job that to me seems absolutely hellish. But hey, so anyway, you've been, it's so important the kind of activism and mobilization that you've done on the ground, and I'm sure you worked to some extent with Interfaith Alliance of Oklahoma. Like
Yes.
the important thing is that there are voices to be lifted up from all different faith traditions who
Yes.
don't agree with what's happening. You can't. These folks don't actually have the mandate they think they have, and
That's it. That's it. They think they
it's
have it all, and they
yeah.
do not.
And they do not. And so that's the reason that everybody listening, hopefully, to this podcast will understand, or a radio show will understand that, they assume they have your consent unless you tell them they don't. And I think that's so important. And that, I think of the great moment when Representative Al Green stood up and said, you don't have a mandate. You don't have a mandate, because he knew he was representing his constituencies that were going to be so hurt when
That's
Medicaid
right.
gets gutted. And, so he was like, you don't have a mandate. And my thought was every Republican should have been saying that, because they don't have a mandate. They won a slim victory, and yet they're acting as if they wield like a dictator's scepter. So anyway, so talk to me a little bit, we're going to talk a lot about Faithful America and like, what is Faithful America for the people who might be new to hearing about Faithful America, and what is the mission, and why does that job excite you now?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for just the mere opportunity of this, just to like get in a little bit of trouble, good trouble, maybe like throw some tables over, like
We're recording this before Holy Week in the Christian calendar, so
that's
which is
right.
that's what Jesus did. In case
That's
people are
right.
not familiar with the story.
Yep, that's right. Faithful America is a large online body, an online collective. It was birthed out of the National Council of Churches, I think in 2004. And then Jen Butler, lovely Jen Butler, took it under her wing at Faith and Public Life. And then it launched into its own thing after that. So it's had a few homes and a lot of love to
Uh-huh.
get where it is now. And what I really foresee my role coming in is to do a lot of what I did in Oklahoma, was gather people and mobilize them. And I know that that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That has to happen with all of our organizations,
Right.
because in Oklahoma, we did that with Interfaith Alliance, Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries, Respect Diversity Foundation, CARE Oklahoma. We were a group, and because we were a group, we were united in message and moving the ball. I really want to be able to do that with you and all of these organizations that are already doing sensational work around this issue, and really mobilize and move people.
Yeah.
And sitting here from my seat here in Oklahoma City, I have all the positivity in the world that we can do this,
I
because
love that.
people in Oklahoma are waking up and seeing it, then it's go time.
Right. I think people have heard me on this podcast talking about the courage that faith folks are showing right now.
Yes.
If you think about Bishop Buddy, if you think about the Catholic bishops, if you think about the Lutheran, services,
Yeah.
no one folded. They didn't say, "Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. We're doing bad things." They said, "No, this is who we are. You're coming for us? No, we're going to come for you." And I
the
think that
Quakers.
and the Quakers, of course, and
Quakers.
it's the Quakers, but then they were joined by the Sikh Coalition and the Cooperative Baptists, who have never done anything like this. They joined in. And so I think wider and wider and wider. And if you think about the Christian community broadly, I think many, many Christians who might view themselves as conservative in many areas are recognizing, well, yeah, but we gave to World Vision for years to help people not be hungry around the world, or to stop AIDS in different areas. And you're cutting all of that. You just cut us off completely. So I think that there are opportunities for Faithful America to really rally a broad selection of the Christian community and say, what are we going to do to ensure that our ability to express our religion is not being attacked again and again and again by the Trump, Musk, Vance administration?
Right. We're definitely keeping my eye on this Office of Anti-Christian Bias that Trump has launched with Paula White. Definitely got my eye on that, because that's going to become a different sort of entity.
Well, it's very interesting, and the moment they launched that, I'm sure you and certainly I was like, hey, listen, the threat is coming from inside the house.
Yes.
The most anti-Christian administration we've had in recent years. You've attacked everybody. So what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And, ironically, even under DEI, there was a Christian affinity group in the State Department that had to disband because it was under the DEI mantle. Like, this idea of diversity, it includes everybody. And, this is another example of just like the privileging of a certain kind of Christianity. It's not about Christianity. Let's just be clear. It's about a certain kind of Christianity that agrees exactly with their agenda on every point. And so it's entirely a political effort. So what would you say are the three priorities of kind of policy or things that Faithful America is really going to be concentrating on in the coming months?
We definitely want to make sure that faith is standing strong in spaces where people are being ostracized. So that means making sure that we have a coordinated presence, at least visibly, at Pride celebrations, and figuring out partnerships so that we can help plug people of faith into roles to help with security or whatever is needed. We have a lot of conversations internally about the immigration crisis and the detention centers specifically. What is it going to look like if the Insurrection Act is enacted?
Right.
Those are conversations that need to be proactively had with those that are going to be affected, which inevitably is going to be us all. But not being scared of that and understanding what it means to be a person of faith under circumstances like this is really important. We want to blow the highlight horn, and I just saw the amicus brief yesterday on St. Isidore, but we, especially with me coming into this role, am trying to get the word out that this is scary, scary. This is a life-defining decision.
So tell the people listening what this is that you're referencing.
Yes. So I'm talking about St. Isidore. St. Isidore Academy is a Catholic school And it applied in 2023 to become a virtual charter school in the state of Oklahoma. This was done with the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, the Diocese of Tulsa, and the Catholic Conference of Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, charter schools, even virtual charter schools, are considered public schools. Herein lies the issue. So we have the Catholic Church coming in, making a proposal to start a charter school board, knowing full well that that is a public school that receives public dollars. It was done with the exact intention of ending up where it's going,
Yeah.
which is to the United States Supreme Court. It was developed and launched that way.
Yeah.
And so in March of 2023, I submitted written opposition to the committee. And in April 2023, I was one of 6 who made verbal comment at this tiny little virtual school board meeting. But every public comment was in opposition of this entity. It was across the board opposition. They made the decision not to pursue it, but to send it to the Oklahoma Supreme Court to decide. So the Oklahoma Supreme Court last year in 2024 decides the case 7-1 against it.
Wow.
Saying this is unconstitutional. I watched the arguments, and it's clearly they're using the free exercise clause. And I've been hearing this a lot from politicians. They're using the free exercise clause to argue against the establishment clause.
Right.
Making a claim that the establishment clause is preventing free exercise, as if they're two separate things rather than a check and balance on each other in and of itself. That's the nature of their argument, and they lost pretty big, 7-1 in Oklahoma. So lots of us were like, thank God, good job, yay, Oklahoma. Christian nationalists come after our judges that, of course, were up, and one of them actually did not get reelected because of it. And then we hear the news at the beginning of this year that the United States Supreme Court is going to hear this case, and the shock of that is wild that they would even take it. So what we have approaching us on April 30th is the Supreme Court is hearing arguments for St. Isidore Academy to essentially obliterate the Establishment Clause.
Yeah, I mean, the implications of this, I completely have lost faith in the Supreme Court, and I don't know exactly what it will mean, but we all we can do is try at this point to persuade a couple of the members who normally, would automatically side with this idea of the Christian nationalist playbook being entered into the Constitution, which was supposed to guard against it. So, here's hoping. But, at stake is really like, public schools.
Yes.
In some ways. I mean, the end game is to destroy public schools and take away funding from public schools. And
look at how Oklahoma has done that. Because that's exactly how it's going to unfold.
Yeah. And, again, way to go, Oklahoma, with your 49th ranking. Just a plummet. It's so interesting because that's not a long time ago that Oklahoma was at 23. You have to really work to lose that to lose that much traction. I'm also really interested in this moment for LGBTQ equality and faith because I do think there is among some a backsliding of support. They've spent, when you spend close to $300 million against trans people are going to start like having other ideas about trans, and then you have people who are there's I don't know if this has happened in Oklahoma, but there's about 10 states where people have introduced anti-gay marriage bills, they're fringe still, but this is how it starts.
That's so important, is the fringe, that fringe idea becoming mainstream, because that's exactly what has happened. So when we look at these fringe characters, we are no longer in the privileged position of brushing that off as fringe
Yeah,
because the highway has been paved for them.
that's right. And here's where we have to be really clear. At the same time, we recognize that the fringe is almost no longer the fringe. It's also so important for us to remember that we are in the majority. That we not act like that we are some sort of small resistance effort. We're not. We're actually representing the majority of traditions in America who really do want pluralism, who really do
Yes.
want equality for everyone, who are not looking to take rights away from LGBTQ people, even are not looking to strip women the right to make decisions about abortion or whatever they want to do with their bodies. These are actually mainstream religious opinions, and
Yes.
we have to remind those of us who hold them that we are representing an important part of American democracy.
Yes.
Against what is a
Absolutely.
hostile takeover and an effort
Yes.
to impose one view on all of us. And I think that's what I think is really important. And it's also really important for you as a Christian leading an organization that really is focused on Christian mobilization to
Yes.
claim that tradition and to not be shy about it. I think
Ugh.
that's just hugely important. I say all the time, like, you don't pretend like you represent Christianity and I'm somehow an aberration. Actually, I represent a Christian tradition in America
That's right.
that has been part of a great tradition in America. And you know, if I'm going to be a little inflammatory, like the people who are the Christian nationalists now are the heirs of every mistake that has ever been made on behalf of Christianity in American society. They are the heirs of the pro-slavery movement. They are the heirs of the anti-civil rights movement. They are the heirs of the anti-women movement. They are the heirs in the anti-immigration movement. That's what they represent. And now
Yes.
they're in, hopefully, the height of their power, and hopefully it will only go down from here. But it will only happen if you are successful, if Interfaith Alliance is successful, if we're all successful together.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to take all of us. It
Yeah.
will take all of us. But the good news is there's way more of us.
Exactly.
And I think that's why they latch on to power and control so decidingly, is because they know that this is not the number one most popular thing, and people are running from this tradition as quickly as humanly possible. Look
Isn't
at
that
the
amazing?
generations
I mean,
who have
people are
left.
they're fleeing Christianity because of
Fleeing.
these people. Because of
Yes.
these people. Many of the young people say it's because of the LGBT stance. I'm just like, please, you know, don't listen to them. You can go to a church where you'll hear the most pro-LGBT
Right.
Anyway, so let's talk a little bit. I want to get some very tactical. How can people sign up for Faithful America action alerts and to get more information? Where do they go?
Go to our website. It's faithfulamerica.org. What you will see is newsletters. You'll get petitions that we do and drives, and you'll hear more from me in the coming months, because now that everyone knows that I'm here, I intend to do some talking. I had to
I-
be quiet until it got announced, and that was really tough for me to just be like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Well, we look forward to hearing your voice. Now, Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, what is one thing that our listeners can do that you would recommend in this time to really be helpful to our democracy?"
this is going to be weird maybe, but a few weeks ago, listen, a few weeks ago, I have some older neighbors, and they were gathered at our mailbox having a conversation, and I needed to go out and get my mail. And rather than duck into my house and hide because I don't want to have dialogue with people, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go out there. And so I did. I went out to my mailbox, where I then engaged in a half-hour conversation with these two older gentlemen who are my neighbors, and got to have a conversation about, hey, I live here by myself with my daughter, and I'm anxious and I'm nervous. And, you know, I've got a lot going on that makes me scared right now. And their response was so neighborly. And it reminded me why I love Oklahoma is because they were very affirming of, we will watch. We will make sure things are okay. You can come here. Here's my phone number. Please have my phone number. Please, this is my name. And it might sound weird, but honestly, knowing the people in our proximity is one of the things that is going to really move the needle, because if they know me and they know Shannon, their neighbor, they don't necessarily know Shannon, the religious leader who says all these things. They know me. And if something happens, they know my soul and my spirit as their neighbor, and not how I am defined by whoever deems to have an opinion. And there's something really wholesome about that. And it is really hard to discriminate and hate and judge and ostracize when you know people.
I love that. I think that is so. Know your neighbor. There's love your neighbor, but also just start with knowing your neighbor. And that's beautiful. Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck is the brand new executive director at Faithful America, the largest online community of Christians advocating for social justice. Sign up for important action alerts and updates at faithfulamerica.org. Shannon, it has been such a pleasure having you on The State of Belief. Thank you for being with us.
So fun. Thank you.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion? Please share The State of Belief with them, and please be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. It really helps if you subscribe. We also need your help to keep making The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I'll be talking with Kelly Jensen, editor at Book Riot and a devoted defender of the right to read in an age of censorship and book bans. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.